Good afternoon, students. We are starting our 5th week, so we are halfway through the course. I wanted to give you a brief update on course material, also show you a new tool that I've put together for you to potentially take advantage of. So this week we are covering events, and like we have seen in past weeks, we need to work through these, do the exercises, and then we're moving on to data binding. And this is really the meat and potatoes of Windows Presentation Foundation. One of the reasons we really like using this for GUI development is data binding provides us with a way of hooking up our data objects out of our data library with the GUI so that it automatically updates all the values in the GUI, and when we make changes from the GUI, those automatically get made to our data object. So we really have kind of this potentially two-way binding or one-way binding where we can hook these different components together with a minimal amount of code on our part. I think you'll find once you get into it that actually it can really quickly. And that's really what we're going to be doing on milestone 5 is we're going to take all of those XAML-based GUI controls that you've built, and we're going to hook them up and make them run. So that's the work for this week. I mentioned that I want to show you a tool that this is something I've been working on. I finally got it to a point where I can publish it. So in Visual Studio, you can go to your dependencies and come down to manage NuGet packages. And I have published this as a NuGet package. So we are going to go to browse. It'll take a moment to load. And then we can search. And ksu.cs.dependent. And actually, if you just search for ksu.cs, you'll find it. But this is a collection, as it says, of code analyzers to look for common mistakes in student code. So I've been paying attention to where students often make mistakes. I've been trying to classify those and get them added so that your IntelliSense can actually give you some feedback on potentially mistakes you might be making in code. So I'm going to go ahead and install that on this example project. And you can do this on any project you want by installing it. It just basically hooks it up to IntelliSense. So now your IntelliSense will give you extra error messages. And give you a couple quick examples. One that I see a lot, which you're probably potentially going to start running into if you haven't, as you start hooking up your data binding, is properties. So if we, example, had a public property of type decimal price. This looks familiar. One with a setter and a getter, so maybe price is not the example, but you can see here we have a getter and setter. Once we start implementing the iNotify property changed interface, we can't use the auto property anymore. So we have to switch to using a private backing variable so that we can flush out our get and set methods. And unfortunately, one of the mistakes that students often make in that process is they don't actually create that private backing variable. They just return the and also set the symbol that they used for their property. Now this price refers to this getter. Now normally you won't get a report that this is a problem, but here now I've added these so you can see that it's telling us that both in the setter and the getter we have price property referencing itself. And why this is a problem is that if we were to use price somewhere in our code and say we create an instance of add a class, so maybe a hamburger, say .price, that's going to invoke this getter. This getter, when it returns this price, is going to trigger this property again. So we're going to invoke the getter, hit this price, which is going to invoke the property again. So we're invoking this again, so we're going to hit the getter. And you can see that's actually an infinite recursion we've set up. It will just keep doing this until the program runs out of memory. At that point, we're going to Stack Overflow exception, so that's going to crash it. Now, this is something that Visual Studio used to let you do without complaint. I've added this little warning to actually it's registered as an error. You can see that it actually is telling us that is an error because at runtime, if we access this property, we're going to crash our program. So we want to fix that. Of course, the right way to do that is to have a private backend variable. And then we can return that private backing variable, and we are good. And there's this also underlined with a warning, and this is another one that I've added, and this is a naming convention violation. Field name price is not prefixed with an underscore. Remember back from 300, Rod or Josh, whoever you're working with, required that all private fields actually be prefaced with an underscore. That indicates that they are private and they're not going to be accessible outside of the class. It's kind of a quick way of doing that. A lot of my examples, I haven't done that. I've just used camel case, so a lowercase letter, but no underscore. But obviously, this is now asking me to underscore. It means these also need the underscore. And right now, I've got biggest thing that's in here is those naming conventions, which we are going to start enforcing on our homeworks. It will catch whenever you make a mistake in one of those, underline it with green, kind of show that that's a mistake. Now, I won't say it's necessarily the most robust enforcement of camel case or Pascal case, but it will make sure that at least the first letter is treated correctly. So that gives you a little bit of extra error checking. We're going to continue to add things to this, so that I'll update the version, let you know when I have more tests in there. That basically anything that shows up in your error list probably needs to be dealt with. We want this error list to be pretty much empty. There are a few things like this one, obviously, saying this args is unused, so you don't necessarily need to leave it in there. That one's okay. That's pretty standard for a console app, but you can kind of get the idea that one of the things we're trying to do here is help you practice writing professional looking code. From a functional standpoint, using variable naming practices may not seem like a big deal, and because it's not going to make your code run better. But what it does do is it helps keep your code consistent and readable so that both you and other programmers can come back and read it and make sense of it. And that's actually a very important thing, because any code that you write is going to have to be maintained in the professional world, and often is going to be worked on with a team. So whatever team you end up working with, they're going to have their own set of coding standards that you're going to follow. And that may be that you don't use the underscore. You may use some other complete system, and there's a lot of different approaches to that. But while you're at K-State, we ask you to go ahead and follow the conventions that we put together for you, which of course you can find here, and also if you go to textbooks, cs.ksu.edu, the data structures textbook. If you go to the appendix, there is our programming style requirements. So these are the things that you need following in your C# code, in 300 and in 400 and 501 coming down the pipe. That's just going to make sure that you are very consistent, and that also makes it easier for us to grade quickly and also to see problems in your code quickly. So it is a good idea and good practice to follow those. All right, we're halfway through the semester. You guys are doing great. I know we're going to start really picking up speed now. The WPF is completely new to all of you, so this is I know a much steeper learning curve at this point than it was necessarily for the first couple sections where we were working with objects and things that we'd done before, but really just doing a deeper dive. Now we're starting to really explore some new ideas. But at the end of this, you're going to be really knowledgeable about WPF as well as Windows forms that you've worked with previously, and it's just going to make you an all-around, more rounded .NET developer. So I hope you guys had a good July 4th weekend. I hope you have a good week, and if you have any questions.